Today, guys, on Hook, the Kayak Anglers Resource, we're going to talk all things trolling motor.
Should be a good one. Stay tuned.
So today, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about the options that you have on your kayak as far as putting a motor on it.
Yeah, it seems like today in kayaking, or like right now, that progression is going to trolling motor. People are wanting to go further, get places, go faster, and really, there's so many different options as far as trolling motors or just motors in general.
Yeah, and there's differences on value, on pricing, on technique, on quality. There's just a lot of ways to do it. So we're going to get into some of that. I think we're going to start off with the stern and start talking about just different options on different kayaks. Now, guys, we're not going to talk a lot about specific kayaks because that's all over the board. We can help you with some different options. We'll throw up like one objective and then the different companies that actually have mounts for their kayaks. But we're going to go pretty much specifically on motors today. Jonathan, I know you've run one before. What about the old MotorGuide Xi3?
Yeah, MotorGuide's really good. They offer a kayak version, and really what that comes down to in that kayak version is a shorter shaft. Just about any bow mounted trolling motor you can put on your kayak. But really what it comes down to is that shaft. And most of it's not necessarily when you're like on the water using it. It's more when you have it pulled up and stowed. If you had, a 60-inch shaft from an Xi3, it's not going to be conducive to your kayak. It's probably going to get in the way. But yeah, the Xi3 is a great option. It's a staple. We talked about one objective. They make tons of bow mount, mounts for specific kayaks, and that's what's really opened up the avenue. The avenue for everyone to put a bow mounted trolling motor. Of course, Garmin has the Kraken. Minn Kota has some different options as well, but it seems like that tried and true one is that MotorGuide Xi3. Now they make the Xi5 as well, which is a higher powered motor. It's also, I believe, a 36 volts, if I remember right. They don't make that in a specific kayak version with the shorter shaft, but there has been people that cut that shaft down too. Speaking of that, with one objective, they also make some tiller handle mounts. So if you're not set on going Xi3 with GPS and all that, you can put a tiller handle bracket on there as well with one objective's mounts and have that kind of option as well. A little different, but gives you the option to do that as well.
Yeah, and the Xi3, I mean, that's a great setup as well. And when you're talking about the length, you got to think about that. A lot of people think, well, it's just a little longer. It's not that big a deal, but if you've ever worked a fish around the front of your boat or anything, you're going to have quite a bit standing up. I know we saw some videos on the Garmin Force on a kayak. You can mount them. We're definitely not saying you can't, but it was up there, up front, so to keep your depths, you got to think about that. But, that Xi3, very cool motor, GPS version, non GPS version. But then one thing we want people to know as well is if you buy the non GPS version, you can get the puck and then actually add that to the GPS to your non GPS version.
Yeah, MotorGuide sells a different remote, and then they sell the module that installs into the existing Xi3 as well. It seems like it's like hard to find sometimes. Like MotorGuide, I don't know if they just don't keep up with it or just kind of run through spurts or whatever. But sometimes it's harder. You're looking at another $500, and that's typically your price difference in the non and the GPS version. But you always have that option later on. The nice part is, if you do go non-GPS and then upgrade later, you always have a backup remote for that as well too. So it's kind of nice if you decide to upgrade that.
Yeah, and the GPS, of course, is for Spotlock, and a lot of that goes down to technique and how you fish. I know you, for instance, you ran the motor guide for the last couple of
Yeah.
years, and now are kind of considering going to something different.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you're a Spotlock guy, great to have. If you're not a Spotlock guy, it's just extra money. So, you got to make that decision and figure out how you fish, what you're doing with it. A lot of times the bow mount motors versus the stern mount, if you're a river guy that wants to shoot up the river back and forth, you have water like we have, fairly shallow, bow mount's probably not your route. But, I like the bow mount motors for my lake boat just because the Spotlock. I start off with MK 106 which we know is just a static motor, forward, reverse. Fished with people who had Spotlock, drove me absolutely batty because I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to stay someplace and they're doing it. Um, and that it does make a big difference if you fish that kind of patterns.
Yeah, the more I noticed, like the most times I was using my spot lock was when I was catching fish and taking pictures. Like that was nice to sit in a spot. I know like I've been crappie fishing at times where it's nice to sit in a spot that way you can see a brush pile. And then, sometimes it just gets to the point where it's really windy and you want to, slow down. That spot lock helps. Um, but it all depends on how you fish. If you want to stand up and use remote and fish, then that's probably the route you want to go.
Yeah, we've seen a
Um,
few guys that at the Big Bass 250, not last year, but the year before, weather was tough, and we had a couple of guys who came back into our shop later and it's like, I saw this big old burly fella in the corner just sit there on fish all day long. So Danny Johnson, Sasquatch bar. If you know Danny, you know that that's pretty accurate. He's a big old boy, and they're like, "What? I want that. That guy. We fought the wind all day. We saw him just stand there and fish a spot, and especially in windy conditions, things like that, the spot lock's handy."
yeah, for sure. This year I'm actually flipping over to a Newport and K180, so I'm going rear mounted. Trying to see if I like it. I've been out in it a couple times. It seems pretty effective, but Newport, Torpedo, Bixby, all those options. Those are all rear mounted options. The upside to like the Newports, the Torpedo, and rear mounted stuff is if you have existing foot control steering, it comes with stuff to run lines for that. It'll come with everything you need to do that. Um, Stuff to think about on that is like Newport, you're gonna have to buy a battery with it, so you're definitely it's going to be a 24-volt system, but that's also the upside because you can
Correct.
buy a bigger battery for that. Torpedo is going to come with its own battery. Um, don't hold me to this, but I think it's like a 35 amp hour battery. So it's not a big battery. But that would give you the option to go rear mounted motor. Both Newport and Torpedo have two different options, the NK180 and the NK300 for Newport, and then the 403 AC and the 1103 AC. Both, one's, the higher ones are the 3 horsepower, the smaller ones are the 1.5. But really good options. And that's where your river guys come into play. A lot of guys want to be able to go up river and not hit the motor the first thing they get into shallow water. So it's a really good option to
Yeah, it's going to
go.
kick up for you.
Correct.
That and remember when you go the from the 403 to 1103 or the 180 to the 300, you're talking about a little more speed, a little more power. So that is nice. It's not an incredible amount of speed, but it is faster. But you are taking on a lot more weight too.
Yes.
Both those larger motors are heavier.
Yeah.
So that's another thing you have to take into account. But we have a lot of customers who come in here and want to put a motor on their boat for the river because access. They can go chuck it in the river, shoot up river, and then float back down to their truck. And now you don't have to have somebody that is picking you up and dropping you off. So they're pretty handy, especially in our area.
Yeah, definitely. And then that more, I would say maybe budget friendly, more smaller would be that Bixby. Bixby as well. They make a ton of mounts that you can set up for your kayak specifically. So there's different options on there. You can set it up for steering. We did one the other day for Spencer O'Neill. He's in a Hobie Outback, and what we did is we actually just left it straight, and that's what I've done with my Newport as well. We didn't run any steering lines or anything like that. We just used it as his propulsion, and then he was able to steer with his rudder. So that's kind of options too if you wanted to go that way. Newport, Torpedo, they all have accessories that you can add to them to kind of replace a rudder. If you already have, say, a pedal drive kayak or something like that has a rudder on there, you can put stuff on there to act as rudder and use that as your steering. Because even if you're just pedaling, you've got that thing down and no power to it, you still want to be able to steer as well. But you'd have to add some sort of rudder kind of add addition on there, which they both make. Um, but
Bixby, one thing nice about Bixby as well is Bixby makes Bixby's more of a kind of all encompassing
it's almost
motor.
almost recreational in a
Yeah,
sense.
because you can put that on you can put it on a paddleboard.
Mhm.
They have a fin mount that is really nice. They have an adapter plate that you can put on just about any pod. So the Bixby is kind of the middle ground. It's not as serious as a motor as far as your larger fishing vessels and things like that. It works great for those, but it's more of something that you can put on pretty easily on just about any kayak or any machine that you want. And they have a mount for just about everything,
Yeah.
whether it's a steerable, whether it's just a straight mount. Great for inflatables,
Mhm.
the Pike, the NRS Pike, things like that. The fin mount makes that stuff. Bixby's done a good job of trying to make that motor where it can go on just about anything.
Yeah.
Where Torpedo and Newport are a little bit more for the serious,
Yeah.
or somebody who's really needing to
More
travel.
more performance.
Exactly.
Um, the other thing too that's cool about Bixby is they do have offer a wireless remote.
Correct.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of nice. You're not having to run wires to that control panel or whatever. Granted, with the Newport and Torpedo, that control module, it gives you your forward and reverse, but also gives you some more information where your battery's at as far as voltage, gives you kind of what watts you're using, and then it gives you kind of how much distance you have as well left in that battery based on the speed you're going at that current time. So
Yeah, and just to clarify for you guys, when you're talking about the Bixby, the 403 Torpedo, and the MK180, you're talking about a half mile an hour difference. So we don't want to, make the Bixby sound like it's not that great. It performs great for what it is, um, but you're not talking about double the speed or 2 or 3 mile an hour. You're talking about a half to a mile an hour,
and
probably.
and that's all in comparison to the kayak that you have as well.
Correct. Yeah. If you're pushing a NRS Pike, or you're pushing a PA14,
Yeah,
that's the PA14 is where you probably ought to go a little bit more
yeah,
motor. But like I said, there's a lot of guys. Spencer is one that it kind of works for him
mhm,
because he wants to use his pedal drive most of the time.
yeah,
But then and that's what I consider the stern motors, or anything mounted in the rear, more of a travel, you know, it's more for getting where you
A to
need to
B,
be,
yeah,
where the stern mounts are a little bit more of something you use in your fishing technique, because you're going to use that to work a dock or
yeah,
work around. So, yeah, I think all good options.
for sure. The other options is, and which they've definitely almost cornered their market. Is looking at a mid-mounted motor, which Old Town, they've got the MK106, they've got the autopilots in the 120 and the 136, and now they have the new EPDL, which is kind of a hybrid, which is kind of almost a topic in itself. It's tough to beat Old Town with their plug and play system. It's hard, you can get your kayak, you can grab a battery, you can be on the water 15, 20 minutes. Like, it's really easy, it's convenient. They've really worked through that stuff where your Xi3, your Newport, there's some sort of installation, some sort of mounting, some sort of rigging, running wires, different stuff like that. So it's really tough to beat them on that platform with the motor out the box, and they give you that option between pedal drive, spot lock, non-spot lock, and
Yeah.
everything.
And that one's close to my heart because that's what I'm in. I love the autopilot. I think the engineering on where that motor sits, uh, when you go left to right, you don't get a whole lot of twist out of that hole. Where I think on the far front bow mounts, you do get a little hole twist. Not bad, but and depends on the boat. If you put that on and out back, it's going to twist a little bit more compared to a PA14, bigger, wider boat. But yeah, I think that they've kind of got that figured out. It helps that Johnson, owns both companies,
Mhm.
so it makes sense that they would build that. But it's just a great machine.
Yeah, they've done a really good job of, kind of out the box, ready to go, very simple. So if you're not the type that wants to rig up a motor and run wires and do all this other stuff, they're a easy option. Throw a
Absolutely.
battery, and whether it's lithium or AMG or whatever, that's
Yeah.
basically what you need.
And I'll tell you another, company that we have here, and this is something I implore everybody to look into. Van Hunk is a company that we have. We've sold a ton of Van Hunk boats. One thing that we like about the Van Hunk, they're a little bit more of an entry level kayak, but everything comes with a Van Hunk. And the nice thing is they have their pod. Well, that pod comes out. They have and this is for somebody who's just kind of wanting to figure out if they like it. You can pull that pod. They sell an e-box. It's like $150. With that e-box, you could put any tiller handle trolling motor in that, You can get, I think you can get a Minn Kota 55-pound thrust for 125 bucks.
Yeah.
You could throw that in there, put a hot battery in it, and for 400 or 500 bucks, you're just going to leave it static and then use your foot controls or your hand controls, or you could turn it if you wanted to crab walk it or something like that.
Yeah.
But look into your kayak that you have and find out what options there are, because you can put a motor on anything.
Yeah.
But just do the research. Give us a call. Email. Check on the forum.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of different options for different kayak brands that could help you get on the water better, and really get to where you're going.
Yeah. Along that route, feel free. They've got that pod there that someone can mount a Bixby to. I believe Yak Gear, and I'm not familiar with all their products, but they sell a lot of mounts similar to One Objective. You may check One Objective's website as well, but I think Yak Gear makes some mounts specifically for the lure to put a trolling motor on there. Um, and really, what it comes down to your limitations is that size of that port through the
Yeah,
middle. Your
and they
your
also
bona
have their
fides,
motor.
your yeah. Correct. So, I mean, you've got different options there. So, like, if you've already got a kayak and you're looking to put it on there, I would weigh all your options. I would ask your local dealer. I would call us, because there's no one right or wrong way to go. Really, it comes down to how you're fishing and how, what level of mounting do you want to go, what route on there. But I mean, motors are not always the answer too. Maybe it's just going to a
Yeah,
pedal drive, but like we want to talk about it, get that information out to you guys, and let you know you've got options if you want to put a motor. So, JT, do you think you'll ever go motor with on a Hobie or any other kayaks you
I
have?
think so, but I would probably go more the route you guys have talked about. I'm so picky about clutter that I just don't think I want one on the front because I've even put a GoPro on the front and that drives me nuts when my pole hits it. Just the way I fish and what side I like to reel them to, I just know for a fact that would be in my way. Honestly, I think I would go with the pod route or maybe eventually on the back, I think would be the options. I'm kind of interested just to try I own the Vanhunk's Pike. So maybe trying an e-box. I think when we're talking about it, you guys did a good job of breaking down. It's really about how complex do you want to be and what's your budget. I know I probably sound like a beating the dead horse every podcast, but it really does come down to
yeah,
that. I mean, if
yeah,
there's
No,
options to
and
fit every budget, but and are you someone who wants to drill into your kayak? That
yeah.
can
And,
be
and what are you
scary.
looking for it to do?
Yeah.
Are you looking for something to help you get to and from? Are you looking something to help you fish the way you want to fish? You got to look at those different things and then help decide what motor is going to work. Because if you're just going to throw a Bixby on a pod and you're wanting to fish around docks, it's probably going to be more of a pain in the butt to use. Because I learned really quick on my motor. I took a motor, got hung up in the trees a little bit with my rods as I went under some trees. I start yakking back and forth on the motor trying to do that instead of being smart and using my paddle and getting down there. And I caused more problems than what it's worth. So, I mean, I think that a motor is definitely something you got to learn. You got to learn batteries. You got to learn some of that stuff to utilize it properly. But yeah, man, I think that there's endless options. You just got to figure out what you're trying to get it to do.
Jump on the forum, like you said. I think the hardest thing is you can research all this stuff and you can find a million different answers and a million different posts. But I think that the best thing you got to do is just reach out to people. No, you guys, I mean, you guys work on and do builds for people there in the shop. So you guys are great resources just to call the Eco Fishing Shop storefront location there in Camden and just talk to you two or get on the forum and ask us. I mean, that's where I've learned most of my stuff. I was just posting there today about trying to add a second tier to my trailer. I'm not a DIYer. I'm slowly learning, but I just find it overwhelming. Like so many people who probably are finding this podcast now are researching it because they just don't know. I say drop a comment to us and we'll answer it.
For
You guys
sure.
talked about specific kayaks. It's so hard to cover them all. But drop us a comment or give you guys a call or shout at you guys. That's the best way to learn.
Jonathan knows the right way to wire in all of that stuff and can help with any questions you have, whether that's pairing or what offering each company has. We both can help with that, but Jonathan's just pretty dang good on the technical stuff. So
Sometimes
give us a call or hit us up on the forum. I think the forum is, like you said, JT, the perfect place for this kind of question. And we'd love to get them and answer them directly and possibly on another podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the nice thing about the forums. You don't have to post it and then look through everybody else's stuff. You can create your own direct post. You can watch that post from start to end. You'll have some guys that have some experience. They'll just give you, the other guys will have their 2 cents. But really, like, sometimes it ends up being more than what you expect, and maybe that's what you want to know. Maybe that gives you your answers or not. But I mean, the cool stuff with this is all the DIY stuff, and even with UJT, like, there's no 100% right way to do it. It's figure it out, learn. I should have done it this way, and don't be afraid of screwing up. But
hit us up. Let us help you.
Yeah. Hey guys, we'd really appreciate it too if you guys dropped a comment, but also if you guys like this episode, subscribe. We'd really appreciate that as well. Again, you guys always have access to Hooked, the Kayak Anglers Resource, on the forum. So you can jump on there, ask your questions, and get dialed in on what you really want to know.